Hello, and welcome to this year's convention. Thank you, Lisa. That was a very kind introduction. I'm particularly excited about this year's theme, which is building connections, building leaders, and building growth. And the reason for that, as Jeff mentioned, and you will keep on hearing throughout this convention, is it's very difficult to separate the three. Right? They're so closely intertwined. When you think about building connections and networking, it's such a strong building block of helping you grow as you go through your career, and you become even stronger leaders in your field. And I'll share with you a little bit about myself, my story, and why I believe it's so important, and why I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about it, and how it has sort of shaped who I have become and who I am in terms of, me standing here before you. Now let me, as Lisa mentioned, I am a mother of an 11-year-old. He's the joy of my life, but he also keeps me very grounded. I split my time, as many of you, managing my work and my life balance. And at one point I thought, when you do networking and you have to do all of these other things that are required of us as professionals, if I try to compartmentalize each one, there's only 24 hours in a day, right? And so how about I blend in some of these things together so they overlap? And as they overlap, and as I kind of try to do what I am doing to be successful, I'm also true to myself. Because when you're thinking about networking or following the path of what other leaders have done, it's great to have role models, and it's great to look at how someone has been successful and follow that. But if you just try to emulate someone else, you're not going to succeed, right? You will probably fail. And as I saw it, if I tried to be, growing up in India, I told myself, I learned my lesson a long time ago, is I don't want to be like someone else. I want to be me. I don't want to act like a man to be successful. I want to be me and be successful, right? I don't want to act like a particular image that has been portrayed as being a successful image and be that person. There are people that are very successful in doing that, but that wasn't me. I had to find myself, and I had to find it in a way that was true to me, that I wasn't putting on an act every time I went to do some networking or talking to people. And that's probably what Lisa saw, is me trying to be authentic. And that's my advice to each one of you as you're thinking of networking. But let's start from the beginning. I'm not going to go into why networking is important. We all know we need to build connections. We need to develop those relationships. I'm going to share with you a little bit about my journey and how I think about networking. There are days when I think networking is great, and there are other days when I think, oh, not another one of those, right? So how do you get into that mindset that gives you networking being as important as it is, as being this powerful thing that you can use, and not waste that opportunity that's been given to you? Because you have this opportunity to go out and a lot of times you're thinking, oh, it's been a long day or a long week, right? I've been in meetings, or I've been trying to prepare for this test. Maybe I'll go to the next one. I'm going to skip this one, right? It's very easy to do that. But you skip one, and then you skip another, and you skip another, and before you know it, you've missed a lot of opportunities. And so how do you show up? How do you motivate yourself? What I try to do is, before I have to go to one of those events, is I try to find out who the audience is, who's going to be there. And then I look at the attendees and I see who are the people that are going to be there, right? And I try to find the people that excite me to go to that event. And I think, oh, my good friend Michael's going to be there, right? I get to hang out with him. Chris Simmons is going to be there. I get to see him again. Lisa, of course. I haven't seen her in a while. It'd be great to catch up with her, right? That makes this event, so much more than just coming to a particular event and doing networking. So thinking about it, being positive, right? Being in a room like this with all of you just fills me with that energy. And I was thinking, what a great way to start the convention with the lion dance. Talk about energy, right? And so once you show up there with that energy, with that positive mindset, I think that's half the battle won, right? So once you get there, what do? I think of networking, and again, this is something that you'll hear over and over again. It is a way of advertising your brand. You have prime time Super Bowl media space. What are you going to do? Not show up? Show up and quietly sort of walk around the edges of the room and hope no one discovers you, finds you, talks to you, and then leave, right? Or do you make your mark? The most important thing I think about networking, along with being genuine, is also being memorable. When I was growing up, my father used to always tell me is don't waste your time going to a meeting or to anything if you're not going to be remembered, if you're not going to make your mark. And that doesn't have to be a mark where you're splashed on the newspapers the next day, God forbid. You want to make your mark, at least somebody remembers you. If you have one conversation, make that conversation memorable. Make that count. Otherwise, don't even bother showing up. So once you've gotten all excited, you've kind of gotten some friends to show up, you get to a networking event, what do? Sometimes when I'm encouraging some of my team members, my more junior staff to go to these networking events, I'll sneak a look at them from the corner of my eye and I say, okay, I need to go rescue this person because they're in a corner because they haven't made eye contact checking their phones or emails while they're at one of these events. How many of you have done that? And that's sort of the safety net. You walk into a room, you don't feel comfortable, you pull out your phone and you start checking emails. Now, before you know it, you've kind of got into that, you get more and more uncomfortable, you really don't, again, that positive energy that you brought with you is slowly dissipating. You're so slowly going into this mindset of, oh, this is not working out for me. I really shouldn't have come. I have so much work to do. I promised someone I'd come home a little early. I'm going to sneak out. And then you start thinking of every excuse that you can find. Right? So, again, try not to do that. Find a friend to go along if you don't want to do it by yourself. Some people are just naturals. They'll show up, they'll make friends, they'll talk. Most of us are not like that. Right? So if I was reading this article about how some of the top performers are typically introverts. I was very surprised about that. I would have guessed the opposite. I would have thought like all of the lead singers and top performers are natural, public speakers. They don't feel nervous. And one of the things that was common to all of them is they prepare. Before they go on stage or before they do something like that, they prepare and they're ready. And when the time comes, a switch comes on and they do that and then they go back to being themselves, right? It is, like I said, it is, again, balancing that, being genuine, but at the same time expressing who you are in a manner. Now, I've said a lot of things, now you're going to be like, oh, this is, so difficult. It's not. It's just practice. I was watching the lion dancers, and I was thinking, I asked Michael over there, I was like, wow, they're so coordinated. How do they even see from under there, right? And I was thinking, just think of how many hours of practice must have gone into that to make it look so effortless. So what we think is something that's natural and effortless usually is something that comes with practice, with many hours, doing it many times. So you go to a networking event, maybe the first time you meet one person. Maybe the next time you meet a few more, and that's how you build on it, right? And seek all the help that you can. When you're joining the conversation, I think one of the things that, a lot of people have shared with me, or I've sort of, seen, even when I started doing this myself, I noticed that, and I will share that with you, is how do you break into a conversation that somebody that's very comfortable is having, right? And I'll give you a very good example of that. When I first started in public accounting, my clients were all very similar, not very diverse, and all of them had very similar interests. So they would talk about certain things, and one of them was American sports. Now, I did not grow up in this country, right? I knew about basketball, I knew about, a little bit about certain games, but I didn't know anything about baseball or American football. So people would be talking, so I would prepare. I would listen to the news, not turn off the sports section when I get to that, as I normally would be tempted to do. I would at least listen to what the score was so that I would have something in my head prepared the next day when I'm in my client meeting, right? So one time, I was just brave enough to blurt it out. I said, guys, baseball is just so confusing to me. If nothing, it got their attention. They were horrified. They were all like, what? I said, well, I grew up with cricket, and I can tell you all the rules of cricket. And just as I'm about to understand baseball, something confuses me because the rules are very similar, but not really. And before you knew it, we had a whole conversation going about the two games. I was telling them about cricket. They were telling me about baseball. I had connected, right? I was able to take my ignorance about something and convert it into something that was meaningful without, demeaning myself or apologizing for it or making myself look less than what I was, right? So there are some ways of joining a conversation without being an expert in it. Your lack of the knowledge could serve as a way of you wanting to learn. You want to be a good listener. So there are times when you want to play that, right? When someone's talking about a place they've been to and you've never been, but you've always wanted to go, right? Ask the right questions. Everybody has a story, and everybody wants to share that story. They have different ways of doing it. So find a way to do that and talk to them about it. Join that conversation without feeling like, should I ask this question? Don't be afraid. Now that you've joined the conversation, you've talked to someone, one other thing I would say is don't wait for the conversation to kind of, don't find one person and just talk to them because you're having a conversation. This is great. Don't be like a sinking person because you're hanging on. If they go away, God forbid, you have a sea of people that you don't know, and what are you going to do, right? And then you can see their body language and they want to kind of move away from you. Don't let that happen. Before you get to that, right, you thank them, you make your closing statement, right? Say, it was great talking to you. Here's my card, or can I have your card? I'd love to follow up with you. And maybe we can have coffee or lunch or however you want to do your closing statement. Make sure you do that, right? And stay away from canned statements like, it was great meeting you. Let's do lunch or coffee sometime. Because that really doesn't mean anything. You really have to make that connection, right? So add something to it. Give that person a reason to want to see you again, to want to have lunch with you. It was great talking to you. Maybe I can, pick your brain about this particular thing you mentioned. Maybe we can talk a little bit about your trip to Hawaii. I'm going to be there in a month, and I'm really looking for ideas as to where I can go snorkeling, right? And chances are that person would be very excited about it. They had a great experience. They want to share it with you. They have an incentive to have lunch with you. Okay? So close it strong. Make sure you end that, and then you move over, find someone else, mingle. Or if that's all the energy you have for that day, congratulate yourself. You've done well, right? And then follow through. Once you've made that connection, don't let it die, right? Don't just, okay, I did that, I'm done, go home, forget all about it. So my husband, who's a marketing consultant, when I started, he'd always been doing this in industry, and I came from academia, so this wasn't all very natural to me. I just liked meeting people, hearing their stories, telling them my stories. That was the kind of, that was where I came from. I would notice he would make notes. He would meet people, he'd come back and he would write down about them, what he had heard. And then I overheard him having a conversation with one of his clients, and he mentioned, he was like, yeah, isn't this weekend Aiden's birthday? And so maybe, we'll try and meet up next week. And that conversation kind of, went along the lines. It was very, very productive for him. And I said, that's what he does. He remembers these things, and he makes that connection meaningful by bringing in some of that personal touch, right? And they talked about, what that birthday party should look like and all of that. There was another thing right there, right? So trying to remember something that the person said, bringing in a element that, again, keeps that relationship going, keeps that connection going. So I tried that recently, and I try to do it as often as I can. I had a client that moved to the area. I had lunch, a potential client that I had lunch with, mentioned that, they'd moved to the area. Their son was 10 years old, was really into robotics, and they were, looking for things to put him in. And I said, that's fantastic. My son's in a robotics league, but we were in a different part of the Bay Area. And I said, I can give you some more information. So in my follow-up email, when I sent him a note, I thanked him for his time, and I said it was great meeting up, and I would love to continue the dialogue. By the way, we talked about this the other day, and here are some, links that you can probably follow and find some things that would be interesting to you and your son. And that's how I think I was able to make that connection a little bit more meaningful for him, because next time I called, he picked up the phone, right? And we had a much better connection than if I just thanked him for lunch and said, thank you for your time, maybe we can follow up again. So don't wait till you get back home, come up with a plan, and think about, how am I going to apply this? Start this very weekend, right? I'm going to get you a little started with that. How many of you have been to Ascend before? Okay, so those of you that haven't, look around, take note, okay? And find that person that raised their hand and ask them about their experience from previous years. Okay? And those of you that have been here before, share that. You obviously came back because you see value to this whole thing, right? Share that. And that's how this networking grows. Again, find out their stories, go back and nurture it. Okay. And then the last thing I'll say is reap the benefits of that relationship. Don't shy away from reaping the rewards of that relationship. Okay. And I'll end with a quick story. And I said you want to end your connection on a positive note. So I don't want to drag on the talk any longer. But I do want to end with this powerful story about networking. When I was trying to make the move from academia to corporate, I took sabbatical. I was a professor. I took sabbatical and I moved to the Bay Area. My husband, my fiance at that time, was already in the Bay Area. And we would go to these networking events. And so he was going to one, and he invited me to come along. And I said, really, I don't want to go. I really have to catch up on my job search. And besides, I was thinking, okay, this is like a group of, IT folks. They're all going to assume I'm also in IT, being an economist. I really wasn't, a tech person. I said, do I want to do this tonight? Maybe I should just catch up on my job search. And then I looked up at him and I said, you know what? I'm going to come along with you. You're new to the area. You've sort of been so supportive. I'm going to come along if it's just to support you. So I show up for the networking event. I met the one other person that was not an engineer, and she was a psychologist. So I had a great conversation with her. We talked about everything, and then she said, so by the way, what are you doing here? And I said, I don't know what PhD economists do in corporate America. There are all these startup jobs, and this was the dot-com boom at that time, and that people wanted me to go into marketing and do all these other things. But I want to do something that makes sense to me, and a lot of this, obviously, I could try, but I don't want to. I want to do something that economists do. And she said, you know what? My cousin is an economist, and he's in transfer pricing. And I said, yeah, that's an area that I've been looking at. And she said, send me a resume, and let me see what I can do. I said, what, it doesn't matter. Let's just have lunch. I'll send you my resume, but we should connect. I like you, and this was great, and I've made a friend. So I come back. I thought, okay, I'm not going to hear anything of that, but at least let me send her a note, because I genuinely enjoyed getting to know her. And I said we should do lunch or coffee sometime. And here's my resume as you had requested. If you can introduce me to your cousin, that would be great. I got an email the next day from her cousin, and then the recruiters called me, and before I knew it, I had a job, right? So that was the best hour of networking that I got, and tell me about the return on investment. So don't be afraid to reap the rewards. If you made a connection, make sure you reach out to them. Make sure when you have something come up, use that. I'm in the middle of this big proposal where I need my European and Asian colleagues to help me out. And those of you that work with folks in Europe know that they're all out on vacation in August. And so I'm stressing out being away. How am I going to get them to help me out? And I sent out a few emails. All of them came back to me saying, we're going to support you in this. And it's not because, I'm this great, fantastic person, which I may be, but they all came back because I'm not just a name in an email. Every time we have our global partner meetings, every time we meet once a year, and every time I'm there, I make an effort to meet up with them, to go up to them and say hello, so they know the face behind that email. And so they feel, sort of obligated, at least to say no to me, or at least respond to me, okay? So that is the power of networking, I would say, and personally, I would say it's like getting up, getting dressed, and going to work. You have to do it. You must do it. There is no other way around it. We're all social animals. We all thrive on that. And if you're not already doing it, try it this weekend. You will see how powerful and how rewarding it is. With that, I'm going to turn the time back and basically challenge you all to focus on networking this weekend. And thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take any questions at this time.